our trash
location to shoot this look in.
It's a cute look though.
Cute, yeah. The dress is perfect for like summer or fall. Beautiful.
Oh, I didn't realize it was like kind of like this orangey. Oh, so pretty.
It brings a nice like pop of color to the outfit. Love.
No, but still amazing.
Beautiful and so soft. I wish you guys could. Here we are in our favorite outfit. You look so chic. Incredible. Yes.
And then the Gucci shoes.
So chic.
Yeah.
And so wearable. Again. Thank you, Dova.
And these pants are really cool too.
Just to make it more fun.
Yeah.
You could obviously wear it with just the skirts or just the
You know?
So many little pockets.
Oh my god.
Lipstick. Just a twist on classics.
Yeah.
And it's a little mod, you know, the silhouette with the tights and the flats and the mini.
When putting together my footage and videos for episode 2 of my fitting series, I realized a lot of things. One of which, A, I didn't shoot enough footage. B, I honestly didn't shoot well enough. And C, the footage lacked a lot of focus. So I did what I do best. Improvise and pivot. But how could I create a compelling episode 2 without good footage? Then it dawned on me I could do an analysis video and have discourse and dialogue on a topic that I've been thinking about lately that pertains to the fitting videos. The topic? What is fashion in 2023? Asterisk, specifically in the New York fashion scene. But before that, if you didn't know, my name is Michelle. I live in New York City and I've been here for about 6 years now, and most of which has been working in the fashion industry, whether that be in retail. Shout out to Opening Ceremony, my first job in New York and my first retail job in general. Or whether that be a photographer's personal assistant. I don't really want to go down that path because of the horror stories I could tell you. Or what I do now, a model. And though I doubt I'd be considered an expert, quote unquote, by me or really anyone, I do feel like the fact that I've kind of dipped my toes in a bunch of different pools in the industry for the past 6 years, and I'm truly a curious observer above it all. I think that my opinions are really coming from a place of wanting to just open up dialogue and to have a conversation and to get people thinking about something that they ordinarily wouldn't think about, and to kind of widen up the discourse, truly at the end of the day. And I feel like I just want to have some fun. So where is fashion currently, and how do I see it manifested in New York, one of the fashion capitals of the world? I want to start off by stating that my opinions are from someone who mainly frequents Lower Manhattan and Brooklyn. I guess if you want to put me in a box, I am the stereotypical fashion hipster, cool girl, art girl, whatever you want to call it, right? But my opinions are based mainly in what I see in these areas. And I think it's important to stress that these areas are where I believe the demographic for the young creative artists that are working in the fashion industry or art adjacent industry mainly frequent and live. And of course, there are exceptions to the rules. People are free to live wherever they want to live, and people frequent other places. But it feels like this is where like the hub of it is, right? The community. At least the ones that I know and the one that I've worked with, you know, for the past 6 years in the industry. But I wanted to state that because it's important to kind of contextualize the environment that we're about to dive into. So I'm breaking down my ideas into 3 different points: aesthetic driven, concept driven, and then my own personal ethos. If I'm going to be honest, this episode and the question of what is fashion in 2023 owes partly to every girl who rocked cowboy boots and mini skirts this spring in New York. It's like I missed a memo or something. That's how pervasive it felt. Every single time I walked out of my apartment, bam, Western boots and micro minis around every corner, ladies and gentlemen. So this got me thinking, what are the popular trends right now? What are people currently wearing? And do I see these on the streets, parties, and bars of New York City? According to the Harvard Crimson, microtrends are described as cycles of short-lived trends that gain a high amount of attention in a fairly short period outside of traditional trend cycles, then fall off the grid and lose public relevance almost just as quickly. I further add that my personal definition of microtrends is more specifically about novelty clothing items, accessories, or patterns, a sort of one-dimensional kitschy identity, as opposed to overarching cultural movements and contextualized zeitgeist like 90s grunge or 60s mod. So, the cowboy boot and skirt combo? Yeah, that was the #1 micro trend I saw on the streets of New York. But guess what? She has a name. Coastal Cowgirl. Yeehaw!
If you want to do the coastal cowgirl aesthetic, but you're over the age of 25, then this is for you.
If your aesthetic is coastal cowgirl, these are the trends I think you should be following for fall 2023.
That's where coastal cowgirl comes in. I'm so excited this is a trend. So let's get.
Like most micro trends today, this more than likely started on TikTok, or at least gained the most visibility there. More on this topic later. According to some research I did, some influencer named Paige Lorenzi coined the term and ushered it into our collective conscious existence. Thank you, Paige. It's Valley Beach Girl meets Southern Country Horse Girl. Think the typical boots, hat, denim on a farm meets lace, floral, light ease of a beach town. That's Coastal Cowgirl. Apparently it's a spin-off of last year's Coastal Grandma. From the images online, this micro trend felt very LA soft. Think puka shells and beads. Compared to what I saw on the streets of New York, dark and leather. Less romance, more bite here. It's like the girls here made her clubby cowgirl. She was ready to go Raven Bushwick in 30 seconds flat when she felt the party heat around the corner. If you know that reference, you know. If you don't, you just have never seen the movie Heat. On Netflix now. Go watch it. Unsurprisingly, New Yorkers made this more practical, walkable, a tad bit edgier to fit the scene, i.e., the gritty, dirty streets of New York City, baby. Instead of lace, leather. Instead of shells, silver. Still cowboy boots, but paired with sheer black tights instead of distressed denim. I think it's important to note that this trend falls very decidedly within the 20s to early 30s white female demographic. And I hesitate to use the following term because it's a bit outdated, but maybe girls with more milder tastes, if you know what I mean. Regardless, trends don't belong to one demographic, especially nowadays, and people are free to dress however they want, but this is just what I saw online. Honorable mention, Micro Trends 2023. Ballet core. Ballet core. Ballet core. Ballet core. Started off with these Mimi flats and leg warmers runway show, then transitioned to every girl in Lower Manhattan and Brooklyn rocking ballet flats and leg warmers. But I think this trend is much more interpretive than literal. Telfar. Telfie. The Bushwick Birkin? All of the above. So the Bushwick Birkin has been around for a few years at this point, but I added it to the list because of how relevant it still feels. I still see her on the arms of every Brooklyn dweller in LES Times Square rat, honestly. But also on a personal note, I was there from the inception of this now iconic and legendary NYC bag. Shout out opening ceremony again. Sambas. Adidas. Wells Bonner edition. I'll just say this trend started off with British designer Wells Bonner collab with Adidas and ended with every Gen Z and younger millennial rocking these sneakers. You can't walk down the streets without seeing these, period.
Yeah, that's the brand.
Renaissance.
She's a Lebanese designer based in Paris.
Oh, I love that. Wow. Oh my gosh, it's like a ballerina.
I know. And then...
Oh my god, if you could feel this right now. It's like has such a heavy weight.
Oh, I love the blazer.
No, this is so pretty. You know, this kind of gives me like Phantom Thread vibes.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I think let's take a photo outside.
Giving Snatch vibes.
So cute.
It's like a
So pretty.
ballerina moment.
I know. Another one of our ballet core.
I know.
Looks. It's
No,
just
ballet
so
core
cute.
is so in right now, though.
I know.
I hate to say it.
I'm gonna do like a full. So cute. With our lace flaps. Got it. Okay. Did I pause it?
For lack of a better term, the next phrase will be called macro trends. Described as trends that are interwoven into the culture, community, and lived in spaces of their time. They define a generation, unlike micro trends, which are much more ephemeral and superficial. Macro trends are pervasive and a bit inescapable, particularly defined by a certain demographic in metropolitan cities. Can you guess what trend I am? Y2K, baby. You can't walk down the streets of New York and not see the influence of this trend. Whether it's head-to-toe Y2K Insta-girlies or whispers of a more refined woman, I argue it's everywhere. Cultivated during the late 90s, early 2000s era, during the Y2K bug scare of the new millennium. An article in the New Wave magazine states, the new millennium was only at arm's length, and Y2K was a visual manifestation of the fun, technologically advanced, and utopian 2000s that mid-1990s societies were excitedly and optimistically envisioning. So the 90s were futuristic, leaning a la The Matrix. Think black latex, tight leather pants, very sci-fi influenced. Or it was metallic color and fabrics, as seen in pop cultural music videos of the time. Think Missy Elliott, TLC, basically anything directed by Hype Williams. Shout out. So the article also states that what we see today in Gen Z Y2K reinterpretation is much more in line with an earlier 2000s trend monikered McBling. It describes McBling as low-rise jeans, velour tracksuits, bandanas, mini handbags, short skirts, the color pink, rhinestones on everything, Juicy Couture, baby fat, Mean Girls, Tom Ford's Gucci, an aesthetic guided by nihilistic luxury, aspirational materialism, and popularized by society's newfound obsession with reality TV and the daily lives of celebrities. So this is an important part, so listen closely. The article also states that though Paris Hilton and a realm of other white celebrities are now labeled the faces of Y2K McBling, the Black American influence and appropriation within the era is strong. Logomania, for example, one of the aesthetic's biggest trends, can be credited to Dapper Dan, who took designer logos and created his own looks, which were worn and spread by hip-hop artists who also popularized the bandanas and bling. As an observer, this is predominantly what I see on the streets of New York, and honestly every fashion girlie's Pinterest page. No shade. Though many may not dress to a T like the above, we all kind of implemented a little cargo pant here, a crop top there, an asymmetrical minimal dress here. And to quote my friend Kay, people in Lower Manhattan are dressing like Backstreet Boys and backup dancers. He says we're living in a moment of subverted basics. And I even further that because I think that this Y2K reinterpretation also feels very shades of 90s minimalism. It's a bit of this kind of 90s minimalism, early 2000s Y2K opulence, and it's all mashed together, sitting in Times Square having a drink at Clandestino. I'll also point out, you see an immediacy here in New York City because it's the fashion capital of the world and so fast-paced. So oftentimes these trends get cultivated here and dispersed to the rest of the world. Maybe a little bit less so now, but more on that later. Everyone's rocking Y2K because it contains multitudes as well. Basically, it works for different demographics because it's less about silhouette, more about styling. So fashion girlies can rock it, basic girlies can rock it. It's super wearable, can be easily thrifted, put together with not a lot of money. You can basically raid your older cousin's closet at this point. So it works perfect for the Gen Z demographic, right? Oh, it's also because of nostalgia and the 20-year fashion cycle. More on that later, though. Macro Trends 23. Honorable mentions. Pop art girl. Okay. I'm not even sure this phrase is a thing on the internet, but I came up with it in my head a few weeks ago, so bear with me. I've described this as girls who rocked checkered prints during the pandemic. You remember those. Shopped pre-pandemic Paloma, you remember her. Someone who currently shops at Lisa Seska. We know who she is. And or home goods store coming soon in Times Square. Mutually exclusive or not, you decide. I think it's very whimsy, ultra femme. It's really colorful eye candy at the end of the day, right? Pop art, baby. And to quote an article from Harper's Bazaar, it's instabate design trends like millennial pink, the Utori Stosas mirror, and mushroom lamps. The checkerboard pattern is uniquely fruitful material for this kind of self-perpetuating appeal. And to quote my friend Kay again, my genius, intuitive, sensitive, gentle friend Kay, it's Scandinavian ideals scanned through digital postmodern consumerism. Yeah. More of that in a few, guys. Just wait. Millennial twee. Remember Zooey Deschanel at her peak? Or Alexa Chung doing her early aughts? Yeah, that's this trend in a nutshell. Okay, so if you're like a mid-range millennial, we all kind of grew up around this. It's that kind of vintage and thrift-inspired hipster Tumblr influence. Think ModCloth, flea markets, those owls that were on everything. So a Vice article aptly describes the aesthetic as the following. Peter Pan collars, pleated miniskirts, ballet flats, knitwear, ukuleles, bikes, parentheses, with wicker baskets, of course, and an inexplicable obsession with mustache-themed jewelry. Yeah, I remember that. So this millennial twee of the late 2000s, early 2010s was heavily influenced by the original twee of the late 70s British music scene, which was a reaction to the punk aggression at the time. I quote, "The original twee indie pop scene had its own unique fashion aesthetic, rooted in a kind of ramshackle thriftiness, corduroy turtlenecks, anoraks, and 60s threads culled from charity shops." Indie sleaze. To quote British Vogue, the look is a messy amalgam of 90s grunge and 80s opulence with a slightly erotic undertone, topped off with an almost pretentious take on retro style. And to quote Harper's, it describes indie sleaze as an American apparel gold lame leggings, side-swept bangs, Richie Tannenbaum headbands, and tank tops with cradius armholes that dipped all the way down to the hip bones. Celebrities looked bad at that time too. Just look at the photos. There was less a PR feel to how everyone was dressing. The time was marked by a presentness not seen today, though. It was party culture, but unabashedly so post-2008 recession. It was also pre-Instagram era, pre-TikTok, but post-MySpace and post-Facebook. So there was less smartphones, so less cameras. A time before technology completely ruled our lives. Man. But here's the question. Do I actually see these macro trends on the streets of New York? Definitely Y2K and pop art girl. But indie sleaze and millennial twee seem to live on the internet only. So far. Let's give it a few years. I mean, before you know it, Everyone turning around every corner in New York will be, honestly speaking, I was in high school when this was the thing, and it brings back a lot of nostalgia, honestly. So I think I'd be happy if it came back a little bit low key. So we've been discussing where is fashion currently on an aesthetic level, but where is it conceptually? Trends don't exist from thin air. There are many factors that contribute to a generation's wear. I believe fashion reacts to the present. Fashion references the past. So there's a theory in fashion called the 20-year cycle. Trends have a 20-year lifespan, it argues. Something that was popular 20 years ago will become popular again. An article by Birdie as to why Gen Z has brought back Y2K. It quotes Colleen Hill, curator of costume accessories at the Museum of FIT, stating 20 years often provides ample time for past styles to look fresh and interesting again. The basic premise behind all of these ideas was the same. They were a reaction to 1980s excess. As luxury started to return during the mid-1990s, it was quite provocative, says Hill, citing Tom Ford's sexy minimalism during his tenure at Gucci and Alexander McQueen's bumpsters, aka low-rise trousers, as examples. That helped to set the stage for the Y2K fashion, she argues. Y2K was futuristic leaning, remember? Because it was reacting to the dawn of a new millennium and its foreseeable technological advances. McBling, its counterpart, was maximalist remixes of mainly 1970s and early 1980s trends and motifs, according to Kari Institute online database. Pop art girl trend, as my friend Kay again argues, is all a trickle down of what Jonathan Anderson has done with Loewe, but inspired by that one flat CDG collection years ago. J.W. Anderson's design team in the last several seasons has really been able to capture a sense of tactility and surrealism through a small screen. When things are consumed on iPhones, everything has to jump off a small format. And I leave the famous last words to Kay. It asks for people to buy more because one purchase will never complete the ideal eye swoon they're trying to capture for the consumption of their peers. Genius. Pop art, baby. Millennial twee was influenced by the British twee music scene of the 70s, remember? Ian Wang is quoted in a Vice article as stating, "There was absolutely a radical strand in twee from the beginning." He explains, twee wasn't just softness and frilliness for the sake of it. It was about embracing a collective joy in the face of political despair and creating an inclusive space outside of the masculine aggression dominant in a lot of rock music at the time. A Vogue article states this about the original millennial twee. When twee originally entered fashion 10 plus years ago, it was hot on the heels of Y2K's sexy, hyper glam, over the top party girl aesthetic. We saw a shift from low-rise jeans to retro cardigans, from label-obsessed to thrift core. Indie sleaze is referenced many times as having 80s and 90s influence. Nylon article states, indie sleaze style was 70s and 80s electronica scene, and even cues from the grunge aesthetic. The time period between 2006 and 2012 was the last on Earth before it became normal to walk around carrying a tiny computer with a professional-grade camera in one's pocket. Nobody dressed up for the express purpose of being photographed. Everyone's stealing every other generation's style, right? Then what is fashion right now? And how is it any different than what it's always been? The internet. From all the articles I read in doing research for this video, there is a unifying thread of thought. It is the condition of humans to crave connection, period. And the internet acts as the conduit to our carnal need for love. And fashion is but a mirror to it all. The pandemic changed how we connect with one another. We couldn't physically see one another. Our human need for connection became so apparent. That's where we relied on our phones, social media, technology to get us through those physically disconnected and isolating years. Those series of opportunistic and unfortunate events shaped the landscape of fashion into what it is today in 2023. This Birdie article, again, lays claim to how nostalgia and a desire for connection fueled the Gen Z demographic to bring back trends that predated them, like Y2K and indie sleaze. The turmoil of the global events of the last 2 years, in particular the pandemic, shifted consumer needs significantly towards escapism and products that reminded them of better, more carefree times, as well as friends and places. And a Business Insider article states that Gen Z digitally bonded during quarantine, prompting the resurgence of these trends to take off on TikTok and making it easy to cycle through so many of them. So this claimed resurgence of indie sleaze by Gen Z is back, I think, because the era was the time in which community and connection was strong. Something that honestly Gen Zers are lacking, right? This in-person human-to-human contact connection, which, you know, I'm not saying that they all live in a bubble and under a rock and on their phones only. I mean, maybe some. But what I am saying is that it's very different from previous generations where we didn't grow up with the internet. This is the first generation that did. The internet has changed how we connect. Indie Sleaze says, fuck that, and leaves the house without a cell phone to see a DIY noise show in somebody's basement. It encourages disciples to experience the world as it was before things became completely untenable, before exhaustion and hopelessness became a rote part of the human condition. What a great quote. And honestly, indie sleaze is my favorite era. Okay, this is my favorite quote so far, so listen closely. Gen Z is reminiscing about a time in which they have few or no memories. The fast pace of social media has splintered pop culture trends so much that unlimited choices have made it harder for younger generations to find unifying cultural touchstones. So they turned to an earlier time when Friends and TRL were some of the only options for after-school TV, bonding a whole generation with common humor, fashion, and theme music. I'll be there for you. And I think this Essence article sums up everything perfectly on how as humans we've always needed connection and a tribe to survive. That's the constant. The variable is everything outside of that. Our environment, culture, time. I think we're doing what we've always done, just different this time because of the paradigm shift of the internet. Ultimately, trends are a reflection of our human need to belong and feel good. Trends provide a way to express our identity and connect with others. Really, we all just want to feel that we're a part of something. And the more that we live apart, the more important those elements of connection become. Our lives are inextricably intertwined with the internet at this point, right? This has never been the case before in previous generations. So I really think that we're trying to figure it out still as we go. So much that a lot of people are saying that there's the death of the 20-year cycle, which basically means that it doesn't take 20 years for something to come back anymore because the internet has made everything so accessible and ubiquitous. And this idea of decontextualizing fashion came up again and again. It argues that the internet is superficial and two-dimensional. It doesn't give context. It can't take the place of real lived-in fashion, but has increasingly becoming so. So, now that everything lives on the ether, what does that mean for the state of fashion? So this Pitchfork article on the endurance of tweet argues the point of digital decontextualization of fashion. I quote, "Expressing your identity via a series of vague signifiers is nothing new, though it is particularly common on TikTok. It's just another means of packaging a vast array of experiences into a consumable product, often at the expense of individual context." TikTok seems to be a main culprit in decontextualization. It's an incubator for fashion trends. We really have to ask ourselves, are these trends really happening in real life? Or did that clip just get a million views, so now it's a thing?
Very cutesy. Tights and shift dresses had a big moment.
A Dazed article questioning whether indie sleaze is really back sardonically asks for the opinion of a TikTok trend forecaster. Here's what they said. It's yet another example of how trends no longer go from runway to rack, but start online. Indie sleaze is a viable option for those who don't want to attach themselves to a subculture, but are still looking for an alternative look. Verbatim, this quote proves my point of the internet taking the place of real life. This cosplay of wanting to co-opt a community's wear without being a part of said community is what every expert argues is the problem with internet-fueled fashion trends, which is basically everything that's out there right now, right? This core, that core. Are we living in a space of endless made-up core trends that aren't actually happening in real life? A Vice article titled "How the 20-Year Cycle Collapsed" furthers this point by addressing the disconnect between trends and their once accompanied demographic. This instant accessibility means that each trend is divorced from much of its original context. Regency core fashion items don't have anything to do with going to the opera, having a manor house, or living without technology. Wearing alt-adjacent clothing doesn't automatically mean you're into rock music, play guitar, and skateboard. They're sort of empty signifiers devoid of their fuller past meaning. And again, this Essence article gives context to those fuller past meanings. It astutely describes the pre- and post effect of the internet. I quote, "Before image-driven social media, there was a bewildering discovery that intrigued us, followed by an almost methodical research component that went into building our understanding of the trends and where they came from. You would gain the required knowledge from a variety of sources, films, magazines, books, vintage shops, etc. But today, the internet is giving us an instant digital collage of ideas with little to no context that originally tied the ideas and aesthetics together. He calls this the flattening effect, as any background or time afforded to search for it has been wiped out altogether as the item sits in your shopping cart." So I'm going to point everyone in the direction of this video called "The Future of Fashion in a Post-COVID World," again referred to me by my lovely friend Kay. It's a conversation with Steele, Rapkin, and Friedman, a few fashion experts, I would say, in their field, as they beautifully argue how fashion necessitates context, particularly in a big city like New York. They make the argument and claim that fashion has to exist in cities.
With your idea that fashion has to exist in the cities, that it's an innately urban phenomenon.
In order for fashion to flourish, a city should have a populace and a sort of be a milieu that's tolerant to different types of fashion, to different modes of self-expression. And that tends to happen in cultural capitals, by and large. And the second thing is that I think sometimes, the city planning itself can affect fashion, because certainly people dress one way in a walking city like New York, and they may dress a different way in a driving city like Los Angeles, just because there are fewer chance encounters, and the New York City sidewalks become sort of a runway for people to express themselves through what they wear.
Certainly cities inform the dress of their inhabitants, their architecture, their colors, their climate. I mean, we talk about New York versus LA, the sort of idea of tall skyscrapers in, gritty urban colors, and often, winter and sort of overcast skies, and you have a city full of people wearing black. And, then you go to LA and you have a city full of people, hiking in the mountains and swimming and wearing bright colors and, lighter fabrics. So there's that element to, how the actual geography of the place informs dress. And then there's
starting with Paris and New York. I mean, what do you think, Vanessa, makes Paris and makes New York fashion cities? I mean,
honestly, I think it's industry, right? It's business. It's these were the places where people of wealth, gathered, assembled, because they were the centers of business. They were the centers of government. They were the centers of culture, as Eugene said, and therefore around them grew up a whole kind of sector to serve them, to dress them. And so you have the garment center and you have the ateliers, and this becomes this kind of virtuous circle. And then at a certain point you had collections and you had Fashion Week, which was just a kind of trade show to, formalize what had been going on.
Friedman was the most incisive with her points. She really opened up my eyes to how dressing in New York is about the interaction you have with the city itself and the people walking down the streets.
And then there's the idea of, different tribes and people wearing clothing to signal their allegiance to a tribe, so that on a street, anyone who sees them can sort of call up a whole host of associations. You're a banker, you're a socialite, you're an artist, you're a journalist.
Yeah. This concept of tribal dressing exists within the realm of the internet too, right? But Friedman astutely points out how manipulated it can be. In my opinion, it's not lived in, but superficially showcased, an artifice. It's so easy to put together a trendy little outfit and take your ubiquitous street style pic. But do you end up rocking that outfit for the rest of the day? Or did you just wear it for the fit pic? Do you know what I mean? There's a difference.
Yeah, although social media is, I think, kind of messing with the idea of street style, because it's like street style that is being performed for the camera in a very different way than being performed for people you're passing by, as you go on your way to somewhere. It becomes a kind of end in itself, and I think that's sort of sapping it of some of its energy.
I leave it to Friedman to have the famous last words.
I think it's the decontextualization of it that creates the problem. That's what cities give you, and that's what streets give you. They put everything in a place and a frame that is very specific. And when it's like the city of online, it's not the same.
Yeah.
Thank you for reaching the end of my video. After all that was said and done, here we are. We've reached the end. Welcome to the end of my video. I never thought I was well, it took a long time for me to get here. But I'm glad you made it to the end with me. Okay, so I have one last truism that I need to espouse. Fashion belongs to everyone and no one all at once. Basically, the internet has democratized it to a point where everyone has a finger in the pot. For better or for worse, that's just where we're at. I don't even think I have a dog in the race, you know what I mean? Because you see, trends don't necessarily start in these virtuous circles in New York City anymore, A teenager from Ohio can create a 30-second clip on TikTok and unknowingly usher in the newest viral core trend. We've all seen that video, or a version of that video. From everyone I talked to in the fashion community in New York City, there's a low hum of malaise and a jaded edge in everyone's demeanor and just how they really talk about fashion right now. The internet, again, has oversaturated the landscape. It's an endless access to infinite brands and infinite imagery and infinite content and infinite influencers, infiniteness. But I don't want to end this video on a nihilistic, misanthropic, sad, depressing note. If I had to say something positive, I think more people are elevating their style, and there's an overall bigger awareness of how we play with fashion because of the internet. And New York is still the fashion capital of the world. Brands are still setting the cultural taste for the rest of, America here. I really don't see that changing anytime soon. If I had to have the famous last words, I urge everyone to maybe do some research of their own on a topic you might have found interesting in this video, to explore deeper into whatever might have sparked an idea for you. I really wanted to expand discourse and bring forth more questions than answers here. Because I don't think there's a definitive one for the question of what is fashion in 2023. Just concepts and ideas and conversations that we can have, right? Time is the ultimate truth teller. So let's have a conversation. Talk to me. I want to hear your comments, concerns, opinions, whatever it is. Until then, have fun with fashion. Cultivate your own personal taste. I know we've been talking about trends, but it's okay to take a little bit from a trend, but also make that your own. Make it individual to who you are. Be weird. I really see fashion as a second skin, as an armor, as a outer expression of our inner selves. And I've always felt this way since I was a child. It was the only way in which I felt like I had a voice for myself, a way in which I could present myself artistically to the world. It's a form of lifelong self-expression. And I love that shit.